All right, I'm going to invite up Ileana and Jess to come up, and hopefully Jonathan is online, can join us, and maybe just head back to your seats and we'll start the permit streamlining process discussion. And Jonathan, if you're online and can hear us, Ileana's going to kick off, and then you'll be second person.
This is my last presentation, and then...
Is that the same one we just used before?
Yeah, the streamlining.
No, the same one.
We threw it up earlier for 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah, we remember.
Yep. Perfect. Okay. So as promised, I'm going to go into more depth about HPAs and the different streamlined ones. So yet again, HPA is a permit to protect fish life and fish habitat. We have the Fish Habitat Enhancement Project, the FHEP, and then we have the Habitat Recovery Pilot Program, which is HRPP. What is needed? JARPA and application, SEPA determination, and project plans with ordinary high water line. Fill out your JARPA. You can use it for multiple agencies. Already covered this, so I figure. So 2 options for that streamline. We have the FHEP and the HRPP. Hopefully it's okay. I'm going to stick with the acronyms now just because they're both mouthfuls. So as we discussed earlier, when it comes to the FHEP, there are limited project types. And so if it does not fall under FHEP, that's where you can go to that HRPP. But on the east side especially, I highly recommend going with the FHEP if you can. One thing that's nice about both of these programs is they are an HPA. They are free. We have 45 days to issue them. And also they are SEPA and local permits exempt. Unless there's federal programs requiring them, then that's another story. And then the HRPP does not have project type limits, but then there's a MAP team involved and a little bit different of a review, so I'll cover those. So FHEPs, as we discussed before, they need to remove a human-made fish barrier. So a lot of the FHEPs I've seen have been culvert replacements, but there are some options. Restoring an eroded or unstable stream bank using bioengineered techniques. So using large woody debris, using plants, mix of other things. Or placing wood, debris, or other in-stream structures that benefit naturally reproducing fish stocks. So if you're doing engineered log jams, just putting in wood, BDAs, there's quite a few different options. So for the FHEP, you need in writing approval of the project. So one of the most common ones I work with is the local conservation district in Okanagan. With the tribes, usually it's their tribe that does their sponsorship, but it's essentially just a letter from one of the list of groups just saying, hey, this project, we think it would be a benefit to fish life and fish habitat. So it's usually called sponsorship, and I just always want to clarify it's not a monetary sponsorship, it's just a letter saying we support after reviewing the plans. And one thing that's really important is when you submit for an FHEP, so submitting the JARPA and the project plans, it is really important that on the same day you submit it to WDFW, you also submit it to the local planning department on the same day. So once you submit it to us, we send out a notification to the local government, and they have 15 days to address any comments or concerns with us. But then we get that permit issued in under those 45 days. And As I mentioned, FHEP is SEPA exempt as well as exempt from other local government permits and fees. So lots of it, at least in my experience in Okanagan, it's a lot of shoreline exemption and SEPA exemption. So how do you apply for an FHEP? As I've talked about a few times, JARPA, it's a great resource to use, especially if you're needing more than just one permit. That sponsorship letter just saying, hey, we support this project. Project plans with the ordinary high water line labeled. And as I mentioned, to apply for the exemption, you need to send it to the other agencies the same day you send it to us. And then in addition to the JARPA, we have the supplement form right here, just saying what project type your project is, one of the 4, and then who is approving your project. So now going on to HRPP. So as we talked about before, a project must benefit freshwater, estuarine, or marine fish or their habitat. On the east side, freshwater, unless there's some ocean I don't know about out here. Reviewed, approved, or funded by selected restoration programs, which I will show you in a minute. There's 13, if I remember the number correctly. Document consistency with local, state, and federal flood risks, reviewed by DOP, and then also apply to Department of Natural Resources if on a state aquatic land. So this is one of the significant differences is FHEP, we never ask for anything relating to cultural resources. But for this, that part of your package when you submit for the permit is that cultural review. So it is also SEPA exempt, just like the FHEP, and it can help get you out of some permits, like building permits, critical area review. So those are all the local permits that will no longer be needed if you do the HRPP. But when it comes to state, a lot of them are needed if applicable, and same with federal. So how do you apply for an HRPP? First things first, I honestly recommend reaching out and just seeing if it can qualify for an FHEP. I've recently worked with an agency in my area where they were debating if they needed HRPP or FHEP, and we were able to establish, let's go the FHEP route, and it was a little bit more streamlined. So you can reach out to your local habitat biologist or to Gina Piazza, our HRPP coordinator. And to apply, you just fill out a standard HPA. Under SEPA, instead of, because you're SEPA exempt, you write HRPP. And then also one thing to highlight is these are the different agencies or different programs that you need approval from. So you can see they're a little bit different than the FHEP. As long as they're either like funding, reviewing, and approving. So they don't necessarily need to be funding it, but they have to review and approve the project. So I know how everyone has needed yet another cheesy meme in their life, but I just really want to remind you guys to reach out, call your habitat biologist. We're a good time most of the time, but honestly, and we have this fancy cool map that a lot of people don't know about because where our coverage ends and starts can be very confusing sometimes. So if you just Google WDFW, Areas of Responsibility Map, and also all of these QR codes will take you to these websites. You can then type in coordinates, parcel, address, and it will tell you exactly which Habitat Bio covers that and their contact information. So I highly recommend, because even myself, I get a little confused of where our coverage ends and starts. So I highly recommend utilizing this. And that's it from me for now.
We do have time for like a question or two before we go to the next person, if there is a question. Oh, James.
So is there any guidance for when the FHEP is applicable or not? Because like looking on the list, it just seems like if you are putting any kind of large woody material in, you qualify. So you could, if you put large wood and also do major channel reconstruction.
And see, that is funny because like with the Lower Pashastin, I actually had to ask like my supervisor before being like, why wasn't it FHEP, why was it HRPP? And it was because of the channel realignment. If there's channel realignment, my understanding is it cannot qualify for an FHEP. Please correct me if I'm wrong in the back, my other habitat bios, but it has to, so if you're doing like eroding banks and large wood, that's great, but it has to be only those aspects of the project. If that makes,
So those three, or I think it was three
Yeah.
or four categories, are exclusive, not inclusive.
Yeah.
Then okay.
and so that's the one thing that's nice about the HRPP is that it is not, because as long as it's benefiting freshwater fish and habitat, then it's not project limiting, but you do have a different boards that you have to go through, and then you also have that cultural component.
Okay, so we should, if we're doing any of those categories, try to do FAP and talk to the bio to see if for some reason it doesn't qualify.
Yeah, and honestly, when I originally created my PowerPoint, because I thought it was just be one long one, I was literally going to put a picture of depends, because it depends. It always depends. Every project, every system, everything is different. And so honestly, reaching out early and often, we can work with you and try to figure out what is the most efficient and streamlined way to help you, because we like to just get your project on the road. You know, there's so much work that needs to be done, so we try to help to the best of our ability.
All right, we're going to transition to Jonathan Luce, which, wow, hybrid worked. We had a really bad hybrid experience earlier, so glad this works. So, yeah, he's going to talk about Department of Ecology and the Colomar-Lomar process. So you got about 9 minutes, so take it away.
Okay, great. Sound check. Can you hear me?
Yep, yeah, loud and clear.
Awesome. And I'm just going to try not to think about how my face is probably on like a 30-foot screen or something right now. But hi, everybody. My name's Jonathan Lose. I am with Washington Department of Ecology, and I'm our flood policy lead. I work on our HQ floodplain management unit that works statewide. And so to ground our conversation here today, Washington Department of Ecology is the state agency with responsibility for administering the state's floodplain management laws and standards. And those standards are designed to make the state eligible for enrollment in the National Flood Insurance Program, or the NFIP. And so the bulk of what ecology and my unit's responsibilities are involve providing financial and technical assistance to local communities and local jurisdictions to help them maintain good standing with the NFIP so they can keep providing flood insurance to structures and homes within high hazard flood risk areas. So as many folks know in here probably, the National Flood Insurance Program is a really complex and challenging regulatory system to work in, period. But it's incredibly complex when you try to do restoration within that regulatory system, because the NFIP is really designed to permit incremental, safe development of floodplains. It really wasn't designed to handle undeveloping or restoring floodplains. Still, that's within that context, Washington jurisdictions have been working and figuring out ways to advance restoration within that permitting system. And indeed, there's ongoing statewide conversations about how to streamline and improve and even reform in some places NFIP permitting, floodplain permitting, and mapping to support restoration goals. And so today, Ryan invited me here to provide a high-level overview of some things that Department of Ecology is working on to improve the support that we can provide to local jurisdictions in advancing mapping and permitting for restoration in the NFIP. So let me see if I can just share my one screen here. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So the high-level vision statement of where we're trying to get over the next 3 years, ecology would like to play a larger role in supporting local jurisdictions navigate complex floodplain mapping and permitting systems. The plan to achieve that vision is two parts, and it involves building ecology's technical expertise and capacity over the coming 3+ years. And our objectives are twofold. The first, to increase the pace and scale of county-wide and watershed scale map updates across the state. And then second, to help fill local capacity gaps to support the Colomar-Lomar process for floodplain restoration projects. And as many folks are probably aware, the Colomar-Lomar process is the letter of map revision process that's required for any adjustments to flow paths or base flood elevations within the floodway. So looking at this plan a little further, part one, which kicked off this past October, last month, involves securing a cooperative technical partnership, a CTP, with FEMA that we had just started in October, that was awarded by FEMA Region 10. And this CTP allows our flood engineer, our only flood engineer currently, Lynn Schmidt, who is an incredible resource, many of you probably know, to begin training and working alongside FEMA Region 10 as well as the MT2 team to learn the ways of their engineering and mapping process and to carry out a number of pilot map studies in small and medium watersheds across the state, but especially in eastern Washington. So the period of performance for this CTP is from last October until September 2026, over the next 2 years. During this time, we are also pursuing funding from state and federal sources to hire 2 new FTE full-time flood engineers to our team to really beef up our capacity to then have technical guidance and staff available full-time to work with communities navigating map updates and CLOMER applications for restoration projects. To get there, part 2 of our plan is to apply for another FEMA CTP in 2026 that will request formal responsibilities for reviewing CLOMER-LOMER applications for restoration projects in Washington. And so we plan right now, we've been working with FEMA Region 10. They support, enthusiastically support so far our plan to go after the CTP and take on these responsibilities and new staff. And we planned, if we have funding and staff on board, to apply for that CLOMER CTP in fall 2026 and hopefully be available within the year to provide some of those services. So that's the high-level overview I have for you today. And just a reminder, this is the team I work on, the HQ team, Floodplain Management Unit at Ecology, supervised by Mary Huff. I'm the flood policy lead. I'm realizing I took the figure that only had my contact information, so I will provide others if folks need them. But we have our risk map coordinator, Jerry Franklin, Amelia Peterson, our FBD coordinator and planner, Heather Rogers, our fluvial geomorphologist, and Lynn Schmidt is our flood engineer, and Amanda Richardson is our NFIP coordinator. Great team of folks, and we are here to serve you all. We also have regional specialists that work statewide, and many of you probably know them. And I'd be happy to provide any contacts for any of them if folks want to reach out. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. We got a couple minutes for questions. If anybody has any questions for Jonathan about what's going on at Department of Ecology. Okay, we got one. One sec, Jonathan.
With Ecology taking over a role in the CLOMAR approval or the creation of the LOMAR, what changes should we expect as restoration professionals?
Yeah, good question. So, and I need to be careful with how I articulate this. This LOMAR, CLOMAR review responsibility is one that other states also have taken on, and there's a model here. There's a formal procedure for applying for that. And we wouldn't have sole responsibility. We would review them in addition to FEMA, in partnership with FEMA, and FEMA teams would still have the ultimate authority to sign off on them, but we would be able to process a lot of the components that go into the CLOMAR applications, as far as I understand it. We would also be able to work closely with project proponents to help do quality control and carry out the studies, perhaps even provide some of the technical capacity to complete those studies that are needed to go into the CLOMAR permit applications, and reduce the time back and forth between Washington and then submitting them to the MT2 team in DC and at FEMA HQ. It will also have the added benefit of having the state-based expertise and knowledge of the watershed systems we're working in. The CLOMAR itself won't change any of the requirements for it, but we're hoping just the process, the time and lift that goes into them can be reduced for local proponents.
Jonathan, if you don't mind sticking around for the next 10 minutes or so, we might have any questions to wrap up this session, but I want to transition to Jess, and he'll wrap up, so take it away.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, there you go. Okay. Is there, do you have time for one question? I'm sorry, I just saw one online.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
For Jonathan.
yeah, sure. Quick question.
Okay, quick question. So Allison said, my understanding is that there are efforts towards lobbying FEMA to reinstate the exemption for habitat projects. Given that ecology is stepping into this new Clomer support role, that makes it seem that that's no longer the case. And can you speak to that, Jonathan?
Sure, thanks for the question, Allison. So just to be clear, the efforts right now underway looking at how Clomer Lomers function for restoration projects are not intended to reinstate the historic exemption that was in place for habitat projects just in Washington. They are looking at actual national legislation proposals to change some of the Clomer requirements for habitat projects. None of that is passed yet. None of that language is even fully circulated, and so I can't speak to what it will or won't do. I can speak to process improvements that we are talking about with FEMA Region 10 as well as other agencies and looking at how things work today. And so part of our efforts to increase our capacity is very much part of that streamlining and effort to improve the current existing system. And I hope that answers your question.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. Anyway, Jess, sorry for the false start. Take it away.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, so this is the third meeting I've been in Wenatchee on a workshop somewhat similar to this. Has anybody else been to? Jason, you were here. Yeah, back in, okay. So we know it's an issue. We know permitting timelines are an issue. So the Corps in the last, we're a big ship, we move slow. We are having a real streamlining effort that we're undertaking in the last year, and we're hoping to have our own workshop in this hopefully spring, summer. We've developed a stream restoration permit streaming guidebook that we're going to have for the community, the practitioners in this sort of field. We hope to do it around the state. We're going to do hopefully 3 to 4 different workshops, present the guidebook, have, I hope, very honest and open discussions on what can happen, at least at the federal level with the Corps. That's all I have control over. And so that's just a plug for what's coming. So yeah, can we do better? Sure. We did dig into the data, and is a slow permitting a issue? Yes. Is it as big an issue as maybe we think you are? Not necessarily. When we dug into the data, our own data, because every time you get a Corps permit, we have a database that we have to put our start and stop time and when it gets issued. And as a little asterisk, our start and stop is when we have a complete application. That's when our timeline starts. And right now, 86% of the time, we're getting permits out in 6 months or less when they're restoration permits. Another 10% are happening in a 6 to 9 month time frame, and then the remainder are year plus. What are those ones? I won't name the geography, but it is a Washington State project where it's a levee setback. Great project. We all are about levee setbacks, except the levee setback went into 5 acres of wetland. Not so easy. So there's that type of project, and then there's stuff like BDAs, which culvert replacements are nationwide permit 27s all day long. So we're endeavoring to go from that 86 to a 96. That's our goal within the Corps. We feel like that's something that we can get to. So plug again for the springtime. We hope to see a ton of people and come loaded for bear, fire away. Maybe we can start that here in a little bit. Because I think really opus, honest discussions, you're not gonna hurt our feelings. So lay it on, and we've heard it all. That's, I think, where we're gonna get to the discussion of how do we really move forward. My background is, I'm fisheries graduate from Oregon State, and I have a wildlife as well. There's so many things that are at odds sometimes within the stream restoration community. I think we're at the point where we've picked the low-hanging fruit, and we're now to projects where there's a lot of encumbrances that maybe we didn't have early on with wetland issues, and we have, rightly so, charismatic megafauna in the form of Pacific salmon, which is something that we should all be worried about for obvious reasons. But we also have those non-listed species, which we don't want to end up on the same list. And so, my own bias is other aquatic vertebrates in the form of herpetofauna. Sometimes we have to balance these things. And the Corps is in an interesting space where, if you read our regs, what we're supposed to do, again, is neither proponent or opponent, is look at the suite of habitat types and the suite of species and coordinate with U.S. Fish via the Fish and Wildlife Coordination Act. So we look at it sometimes a little more holistically. That said, we recognize there's improvement that can be made, and even if we can get to that 86 to 96, that's meaningful, and I think we can get more out. So in prep for that, or maybe even here in the next little bit, we have done a lot of work with Steve Manlow out of the Lower Columbia Fisheries Enhancement Board. Steve did a really strong effort of asking and polling and doing a lot of requests for information from restoration groups of what are you bumping up against, and that information is informing our guidebook. That said, there's some big issues out there that are difficult, and again, it's about where are we able to control through our 404 permit process. And one of those things is the lentic to lotic issue, that conversion issue. Old meander scar that develops into this massively beautiful aspen wetland, but also has the plan form and geomorphology that's appropriate for a wonderful side channel. That's difficult. And so there might be cases where some of these projects may not fit that nationwide permit 27 pathway and have to go through an individual permit pathway. That doesn't mean that you as a restoration practitioner shouldn't move forward with that. We're not talking about a stream restoration, river restoration project for listed fish and non-listed fish and species is not the same as a development or a Walmart. We don't look at them the same way. They have differences. So don't be afraid of this being a really long process for a stream restoration project that's going to be the same for a development. That said, there are some challenges that could happen in the form of compensatory mitigation, which I know is a weird thing to say within a restoration project, but that is a reality that could be something that has to be explored when we continue to work towards, we have these projects where, again, it's sort of the last remaining amount of, we have wetland stream impact issues that are bumping up against one another. That said, the Streamlining guidebook, I think, is going to be really good. Within that, we're also trying to develop some addendums with the idea of getting to what you were talking about, Aaron, which is we were trying to develop a monitoring report, a template that would meet what we need within the Corps that could be used by restoration practitioners. So, we're not a funding agency, but there's some things that we can do in that regard that might help a little bit. We're also going to be developing some wetland delineation determination tools that you all can use that maybe in that way you're not having to potentially spend the 5, 10, 15K on a delineation, but you can do it in-house, putting more money back into your restoration project. So this is what things that we're trying to get into play. We're close, and we're hoping for that, again, late spring, early summer timeframe. So again, aspirational, I think we can get there. That's where we're at. We as the permitting agency, what's very helpful is when we get honest feedback from you who's going through the process. As I said, I had to go through the process to get a water quality cert, it was very eye-opening. So I understand that when we're in it, and we as the permitting agency are doing it, we're sometimes blind to some of our shortcomings on how to move things through. So please, you're not gonna hurt our feelings. Please be honest and very clear with what is working or not working.
Online, any questions, Gabby? Okay. Okay, yeah, great discussion. Now we're gonna kind of wrap up our day with kind of a large panel. So can I ask, I don't think we have room for every presenter, but some of the major ones, like maybe one from the Cultural Resources Stable, you can nominate somebody. I don't know, Stuart, you can come up, and Jean, do you mind coming up? Let's see, I think the Department of Ecology folks left for our final discussion. And then before, kind of like the other ones, was that useful to have kind of the parent share time, or should we just launch right into it? Give me a thumbs up if you want to do a little breakout time to chat amongst yourselves to kind of discuss questions you want to ask. Thumbs up. I'm seeing one. Yep, okay, I'm seeing a couple. Okay, so we'll do a few minutes then, kind of discuss final questions you want to ask. We brainstormed a couple that are on there, but again, this is an open time, benefit you. What are the questions you can ask? So I'll give you a few minutes to chat amongst yourselves. Maybe write down your question if you don't remember, and then we'll convene back here in a couple minutes. Cool. maybe give you 30 more seconds just to wrap up your conversation, and then we'll get started. Gosh, this is like so close up here. I'm sorry to be like a weird person. I should have. That's a note I'm making. Bigger stage.
No one fell out yet.
Yeah, right. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our final panel discussion. Thanks everybody for sticking with it. Let's have some good conversation. So, yeah, any questions? I'll lead off. I think we got our mic runners, I think. Yep, they're ready to go. All right, McLean there, Karen McLean in there. McLean definitely gets a free beer for all his questions, good quality questions.
20 beers. I have been thoughtful about what I've been listening to today, and I'm very grateful for everyone, and thank especially to the panel. And a lot of it was a little bit of the challenges with permitting and how to make it better, and kind of I would say a negative slant, and that's okay. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on, in the last 5 years, it does seem to me that there has been more aquatic restoration than there ever has been. And I wonder if y'all agree with that statement.
Yeah, I think we've seen on the permitting side, we've seen more and more restoration projects come in to the point where we were almost considering a targeted team to just do restoration work, permitting. That's something we're still considering. But yes, we've seen an uptick enough to consider that, which is great.
Yeah, I 100%, and a lot of that's because of you, dude. But on your work on the Wenatchee River, I mean, it's pretty, it's amazing the amount of work that's happening in the Upper Columbia and in the Middle Columbia areas with all the partners and all the work that's happening. And there's just a lot of work happening and money being spent and good work getting done. And and it's I mean, it's a little bit overwhelming, for sure, and because there's a lot of work and like it's great, but it's also crazy. It's it's kind of whack-a-mole almost, but it's good. It's good, and I think for the Forest Service, it's just been a really big exercise in learning how to give up a little bit of control and let work happen, and we're still figuring that out.
I guess I would like to add to that. The department has realized that apps cannot keep up with the permitting needed, and it also has not been updated since 2014. So apps, our permitting software, is actually being updated. It will be shut down November 15th at noon. So that is this Friday. You will lose access to apps until November 23rd, and we will have our new apps launched. We've been seeing some videos of it, and it looks pretty great, and it should hopefully make it more streamlined, more efficient for the bios, but also for the applicants. So that's pretty exciting. One thing to note, though, is you will need a SAW account with the same email that you have for the apps. So I don't know about y'all. I'm not a huge fan of the SAW, but hopefully it works well. And if you have hiccups, reach out to our staff in Olympia.
I've got a question for Jess and maybe Ryan, but I think he may have left already. Can you talk a little bit about the appetite that the jurisdictional agencies are having for determinations versus delineations that are submitted along with the JARPA for some of these large-scale, purely restoration projects?
Yeah, I mean, answer that somewhat in that training that we're gonna do for the workshop publicly, a second pillar of that is we're gonna be doing training internally so that we can get some consistency across the board. Yeah, determinations, it's part of that, back to that. If you can design a project such that you're bumping up against or getting close to a wetland without an impact, or with a small one, we should be able to get away with a determination or a less rigorous delineation. Again, hoping to not be a cost to a restoration entity. Like anything, it's commensurate with the level of complexity. So if you've got a really big impact, and it's a wetland that is not super clear, yeah, we're gonna have to, just by regulatory requirements, require a delineation. But that said, similar to ecology, we are the federal agency with that wetland delineation experience. It's our manual. So we're, please reach out to your core contact and we can assist in any way possible to try and provide some clarity and maybe save some process in that way. Yeah.
Would your answer, oh, thank you. Would that answer still apply for wetlands that are just purely going to be indirectly impacted, say like a re-engaged floodplain where the hydraulic regime is definitely going to change?
Yeah, that's a good question. If it's not going to change the meets and bounds of the wetland or the type of the wetland, if you're going to just push more hydrology into wetland without making it open water, yeah, we can work with you to figure out how to capture it without more paperwork process.
Thank you.
Yeah. I should say that's the Corps' response.
I have a question about a lot of the work that I'm involved with is low-tech restoration, the BDAs, PALs, so forth. I guess one part of it is kind of just maybe some clarity on the definition of what constitutes fill, because it seems there's been a shift in sort of the natural wood and organics that move through the stream, the natural recruitment of wood that moves through streams, and in some ways how beaver and human-made beaver dams simulate that. So maybe that's one question, or maybe I should just stop there.
No, it's a good question, it's a timely question. The strict reading of the regs is any work done, work can include, the discharge of fill or the installation of a large wood or boulder cluster, whatever it is. If that changes the bottom elevation of a water of the U.S., that's considered a discharge and fill and is regulated. So that might be why you're seeing potentially BDA projects or other things that maybe didn't require a permit in the past. Now you're like, what? That's part of it.
I was gonna joke, well, if our BDAs aren't very successful, then they wouldn't agrade a whole lot, but I hope ours are successful. The second part is more just kind of getting back to the timelines. I think I think you'd mentioned that there may be some restoration staff that could be hired, but also just, I'll take for instance, the Climate Commitment Act in the state is funding, millions of dollars of restoration that allows for, again, the low-tech BDAs because of their benefit to riparian corridors. And our first, say, 1.0 version of that funding, we had 12 months that started on July 1st. And our fish window, that's when we could request the money. and we had to be out of the water, say, September. So we had about 80 days from application to be done with all work. So just kind of, that's a little bit, it's a real situation. It's not always the situation, but in the case of, you know, those goals that your agency's shooting for, that may be 6 month or 9 month, you know, I had less than 3 months to implement. So
Right.
I guess if you have some comment on that.
Yeah, sure. So I broke it down into pretty longer chunks. I think of that 86% in 6 months or less, I think I want to say 60% of that was 3 months or less. So yes, we understand 100% that is a short time frame to turn something around. And that's, again, what hopefully we're going to capture in this upcoming streamlining workshop. What is really critical is a complete application. And so having an application that meets all of the drawing standards, all the information, that's critical for us to be able to act. If we don't have a complete application, we have to kick it back. So drawings are really important. And if you go to the core Seattle District website, we have a whole sort of guidance document on what we want our drawings to look like. And that's really sort of that engineering side of the house within the core. Anytime that you can, it's like my dad when, you know, a fireplace, you throw an ugly piece of wood into the fireplace, it never kicks a piece of wood out, right? It's gonna burn it. Similarly, you can talk to us at any time and we're not gonna hold you to anything. So if you are, you know, months before you even have an application and you're looking for some guidance and direction on, okay, where are you at? What's your timeline? What do I need? Call, email, whatever. If you've got a restoration programmatic, FPRP, and you have done some legwork to reach out to tribal entities who we have to, because of our tribal trust responsibilities, talk to, and set that dinner table to, hey, you got concerns, anything you can do to kind of make them aware so that when we are making that notification to the tribes, immediately getting something to the services, and then having that conversation with ecology, that's gonna help, that could potentially save you months. That's just a little tidbit on how to get something moving a little more quickly. I don't know if that's helpful.
I have some questions from earlier that we didn't get to, and the people who asked them are no longer online, but they still might be helpful for other people. Sure. So I believe this was from Allison Lutz. I think she was, I think this was during the first case study. And she asked, why was the Army Corps of Engineers the lead federal agency instead of BPA? I believe that was the Lower Pashastan, yeah, the first case study.
Because the Corps is the one that actually issues the 404 permit, right? So BPA might be the lead. Oh, sorry. BPA might be the lead for ESA in Section 106, but then the Corps is the actual lead for the actual 404 permitting and authorization. So it's BPA may be the lead to help us get to the point where we can give you a permit.
Great, thank you. And then I just had another one from Mike Bosco, and I think it was sort of specific. I didn't.
Spurred a follow-up question, Jess. Would it be possible for BPA to get a regional general permit?
I think so, yes, because I believe, and I'll deny everything.
You're on page.
Yeah. Turn off the mic. I think BPA has an RGP in Portland District for restoration activities. I got to double check on that. I'll double check and get back to you. Yeah, they might be able to do an RGP for BPA related activities, but and we've looked at that, and I don't think I don't know if that dog will hunt. You have a programmatic already in place. It's a nationwide 27. I don't think it gains you any days, right? That said, there might be potentially things like small, low-tech structures like BDAs or other things. Maybe that's something that we can do. So it's a subset of restoration projects where we can do an RGP to move things a little more quickly, something similar maybe to an RGP8. These are the things that we want to talk to you about in the next coming months to year, so that we can, maybe flesh some things out. I am not above borrowing, and stealing anything to make it move more quickly.
Yeah, from our perspective, at least from my experience, the RGP process is a lot faster and easier on us sponsors than nationwide.
Yeah, and part of that is, like, again, we have great partners in the services, and they've worked hard on those programmatics, but it still does require anywhere from a 2 to 3 week to 4 week review potentially. Again, staffing is an issue, overload is an issue. The benefit with the RGP is, we've already front-loaded it, so it does become very much a checkbox. But what happens in that is, and I know because I just did an RGP, the suite of activities becomes very narrow, like the 11 activities for the Forest Service one. We've had conversations, it's like, it has to be these things and what you listed. So it might gain some real benefit for small things, but for, John's project that's coming in, probably not going to be something that we would be able to use. But anything that we can move along more quickly, we're all for it.
That'd be sweet. Thank you.
I wanted to agree with Aaron that the RGP has been, in my experience, much faster than nationwide also. And also, just so I know, so I make sure I'm right on the context, in this region, at least traditionally, RGP has only been on federal land, and everything else we'd have to do nationwide.
Yeah, RGP8 is only on Forest Service lands and Wyden amendment.
So the Peshastin was nationwide then, right?
Yeah, we
Okay.
have that nationwide,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So I think Mike Bosco, I think he's gone now, but he had just wanted some clarification about the erosivity waiver. So he wasn't sure if after submitting, you're supposed to get a response if you meet the conditions, or if you have the conditions to meet the waiver allowance. I guess, do you get a response or not?
That's Mark.
Oh, okay. Alrighty. We'll find out the answer.
I had a question. When I was talking with the Watts, I asked folks to share any questions, and actually Chris Johnson asked this. It's already been kind of answered, but I'll mention it again. Maybe there's some more info, but he raised a good point of any major permit process requirements or paperwork changes expected in the next 12 months that would impact restoration projects. And you all have kind of shared some of this already, but just thinking, should we wait 12 months because something's going to be easier or something like that? So.
Yeah, I think I've mentioned that of the existing programmatics, a couple of them, like the Arbo programmatic, is, revisions are on the horizon, but probably that horizon is further away than 12 months. The FPRP, that is due for revisions currently, and over the last, I think, 4 years has been kind of extended on a yearly basis by a memo. It's hard, yeah. Hopefully that process, we will be able to kind of address those revisions soon, but currently, it's that memo extension. There are some potential kind of listing decisions for species on the horizon as well that could change the way programmatics are implemented, or if they apply. In those instances, it would make it more complicated, so it would be not worth waiting for. But it's also difficult to predict the future a little bit too. And that includes listing. A lot of time listing decisions will have, exemptions for certain activities. Restoration could be one of those categories that the service could look at include exemptions for. So kind of, yeah, the future is hard to foresee here, but no reason to delay.
I'll just jump in with one positive thing that has happened with the Forest Service lately. While we had BIL and IRA funding, we were able to execute a series of agreements with our tribal partners. So both the Yakima Nation and the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation. And even with the current budget crisis that we have, that funding is now obligated in those agreements. That will help us with our government-to-government consultation responsibilities. So we've funded positions in both tribes for an archaeologist under their cultural resources departments and a natural resources department level liaison to coordinate with us on the NEPA process as well. So we will be looping in the tribes from the very beginning of projects. I think that'll help us all with planning, so know upfront if there's any tribal concerns and roll that into our project designs. And then when we get to the official consultation stage, they already know what's happening and it should be pretty smooth from there. So I'm excited about that.
Going once. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. Just before I close this out, first of all, let's thank our panel. We appreciate you. That was awesome. And really all our permitters as well. Thank you for your time. And thank you all for participating. I think apologies for asking you every other watt about input, but I think it made for a better meeting. Couple things, a reminder, that survey you can again do online or fill out that paper. Be great if you did that. Give us feedback. Give us feedback to permitters. We'll be sharing that with those folks and informing potential future webinars, as I mentioned. Turn those in. There's a box on your way out if you did the paper version. Also, your name tags. We're trying to reduce reuse recycle, so please put your name tags in the little, I think it's a basket out as well. Yeah, our social hour will be in about an hour at 5:30 at Hellbent Brewing. We have a little map on the back of our agenda which takes you down Wenatchee Avenue. And if you go, when you turn down the next road here, you got to kind of go under the walkway because of construction. Another easy way is you can go out this way and then take a left and get to the sidewalk and go up the walkway that way. So, or just put it into Google Maps and use that. With that, I think, is there anything else I need to share before I close this out? I think that's everything. Okay, good. Right on. Well, yeah, thank you all for making this a great workshop. Again, thank you all for the permitters for presenting, taking your time. Thank you all for your participation. And let's keep getting good restoration work done. Thanks. Yeah, thank you all.